Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. Molly stood in front of the sideboard in her small family room, staring at the shiny ring on the countertop. Time seemed to have almost stopped. She felt her aching heart pounding in her temples. Leo's gone and won't be back. How did he find out about this? Or should I ask why he waited so long? Did he see us? Did he look in the window? She fell to her knees, trembling, holding in her hands the note he had left for her. Someone unworthy. Those words hurt her like nothing had ever hurt her before. The thin note burned her fingertips. Fire or ice, she didn't know, but either way she couldn't let it go. It can't end like this. He loves me, he will forgive me, he must forgive. We were made for each other. Unreliable, subversive scum. His voice echoed in her head as salty tears streamed down her beautiful face. After a long and liberating scream, she was able to find the strength to stand on her feet. The 30th variation started up for the 100th time, driving her crazy. She tried to check the system settings, failed, and angrily tore out the socket splitter. Finally, there was silence. But why, Leo? Why the 30th one? I hummed it as I walked up the stairs to the apartment. A coincidence? Telepathy? What are the chances? No, it's unlikely. You tried to send me a message. Suddenly it dawned on her. I always hum it when I'm happy. I always hum it after. Oh no, he was there. And it was then that music, which had always been associated in her mind with happiness and joy, became forever associated with shame and guilt. Where are you? What are you doing? She needed to hear his voice, so she took her smartphone and dialed the number. The message went straight to voicemail. She wasn't the only one who knew how to use airplane mode. Molly left him a sincere request to call her back, and then took a shower. She skipped dinner because she couldn't eat, and then lay down on her empty bed, lost in thought. Should I call his sister? Should I call Bob? Has he told anyone yet? Would they agree to talk to me if he did? Had he already found someone? He can choose anyone at any time he wants. No sane woman can resist his charms. Are other people's hands caressing his perfect body right now? Is someone kissing his soft lips? I'm going to kill this fool. He's mine. Mine. Poor Molly hardly slept that night. Leo was lying on the bed in his motel room, staring at the ceiling. Closed cardboard boxes were scattered on the floor. He couldn't sleep. It was the worst day of his life. All his dreams of love and family were shattered. The love of his life turned out to be a completely different person than he thought. A few months ago, he would never have believed that the woman he married would turn out to be a selfish, greedy liar, capable of sacrificing her dignity and marriage for pleasure. How could she do that? Why did she do it? Had she fallen in love with him? Was it because of his money or his power? Is she really that shallow? Maybe she's just bored with me. Will I be able to love or trust again? Are all women betraying cheaters? No, I just trusted too much and let love blind me. I've known for a while that something was going on. Why didn't I act sooner? After several hours of torment, he decided that there was no point in dwelling on the past. It doesn't matter why she did it. The job is done. This chapter in my life is over and I have to move on. She has a couple of months left to rent. After that, she can extend it in her own name. She can take all the furniture, I'll buy new things. Perhaps it's all for the best. I have to think positively. Lemonade made of lemons. I can handle it. He eventually fell asleep, convincing himself that the problems right in front of him could be solved. Early the next morning, after informing his manager that he was having some personal problems, he went to the nearest local clinic and left blood samples for testing for STDs. If she did it with her boss, then God knows who else she did it with, he thought. From the clinic, he went to meet with a family law lawyer whom he found on the internet. He arrived at the law office shortly before noon, went to the front desk and saw a pretty young secretary talking on the phone with a client. As soon as she noticed Leo, she smiled broadly at him and couldn't take her eyes off him. It was obvious that she was shamelessly eyeing him. Her searching gaze and seductive smile made Leo feel uncomfortable, so he turned away. For the past few years, he has felt protected from the attacks of the fair sex by his wedding ring. Now he felt exposed and vulnerable. It was a long and tense minute until she finally ended the conversation and turned to him with a smile. Hello, how can I help you, sir? Hello, my name is Leopold Bloom. I have an appointment with Miss Wilson. The secretary stared at her computer screen for a few seconds, then turned to him and asked him to take a seat in the waiting area until he was called. Leo sat down as he was asked, took out his smartphone, and once again checked several nearby apartments that he had previously marked in the rental application. The best option looked too good to be true. This offer has just been sent. It was a fully furnished condominium in a nice area overlooking the lake. The price demanded by the landlord was significantly lower than Leo expected, given the location and technical specifications. Leo was a little skeptical, but he still planned to check it out immediately after meeting with Lawyer Wilson. Staring at the screen of his phone, he felt a strange sensation on his right side. The gaze, he assumed, burned through him like radiation. Leo turned his head and noticed the secretary's laser gaze fixed on him. As soon as their eyes met, she raised her eyebrows twice in a row. Leo thought she was cute as a button, but too aggressive for his taste. He had just ended a long-term relationship with someone with overconfidence. He wasn't going to fall into that pit again. He gave her a fake smile and returned to his phone. In less than a moment, a pleasant female voice rang out from his left. "Mr. Bloom?" Leo looked up and saw a slender woman in a business suit approaching him. "She can't be more than 40, he thought. "Yes," he replied simply. "I'm Sue Wilson," she said, warmly shaking his hand. "We spoke on the phone earlier. Could you follow me, please?" Leo couldn't help but feel a slight twinge of pain and jealousy when he noticed the wedding ring on her finger. He also couldn't help but admire her swaying curves, tightly wrapped in a black silk skirt, as he followed her to her office. Once in her office, Leo didn't waste any time. He immediately gave her a brief overview of the circumstances that led him to her, expressing his desire to officially end his marriage as soon as possible. He tried not to miss a single detail that might be relevant to this issue. Sue didn't interrupt him while he was talking and tried to stay focused, although there were times when Leo felt that she was losing her concentration. Leo finally finished talking and waited for her answer. She looked at him with a strange, long look, as if she was looking somewhere past him. She tilted her head, then flinched when he spoke. "Well, Mrs. Wilson, what do you think?" She gathered her thoughts, thought for a while, and finally said, "Please call me Sue. This case should be very easy to handle. You have been married for only 3 years, you have no children or joint property. You don't even have a joint bank account. Besides, you both earn about the same amount, so alimony is out of the question. None of you have any special savings. You leave her the furniture along with the contents of the house. The lease is in your name, but she can stay there for the rest of the time. In general, you can consider this a deal. I can file the documents in court this afternoon and she will be served tomorrow." Leo was speechless. He did not expect that everything would be so simple. After agreeing to all her terms and conditions, he signed all the forms she laid out for him and gave her an advance payment for her services. He didn't know, but Sue gave him a 20% discount on the fixed rate she usually charged in such cases. When they said goodbye and shook hands on her doorstep, she promised to keep in touch with him, letting him know as soon as something important happened. He practically had to pull his hand away from hers. "What a lovely lady," he thought, waiting for the elevator. "Her handshake is a little strong, but overall I could imagine myself with someone like her." Leo shook his head, trying to banish the crazy thought. He knew he wasn't in the mood to accurately judge any woman he met. Leo was in his car, heading to the coveted condo. He turned off airplane mode on his phone and called the landlord to arrange a screening. "I live nearby, so I can get there in 15 minutes, the old man said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Leo replied. Before the call ended, Leo heard a call waiting tone. He checked the number. It was Molly. Leo ignored the annoying beep for a while, but admitted to himself that sooner or later he would have to face her face to face. He decided to answer. "Yes?" "Oh, Leo, baby, finally. I've been trying to call you all day. I was so worried. Where are you? Are you okay? Listen, we need to talk. I know you're angry right now, but I have so much to tell you." Anticipating that this would be followed by endless incoherent chatter, and all this in an unpleasant, high-pitched voice that was already coming from the car speakers, Leo decided to lower the volume to 0, enjoying the blessed silence. After about 2 minutes, he turned up the volume again. Leo, are you here? So, what do you say we meet for dinner around 7? "No," was his emphatic reply. "Please, baby, we can't do this over the phone. There are so many things here. I can't meet you because, to be honest, I'm not sure if I can control myself." "Oh, please, baby, I'm so sorry. You have to believe me. If you'll just let me explain that I—" "No," he barked, unsuccessfully trying to lower his voice. "Just the sound of your voice makes me sick." I'm only going to say this once, so I need you to pay attention. I have discovered that you are a petty, selfish, lying snake who has given up all the values that are important to me for the sake of your pleasure. We really have nothing to talk about. Baby, I know it hurts, but it's beyond any pain. He interrupted her again. You've been humiliating me for months, constantly lying to my face. I really don't want to see or hear from you anymore. Why should I listen to more excuses and lies? Why should I do you the honor of explaining myself when you haven't shown me any respect? What's the point of digging into fresh wounds? Molly was amazed. I've decided to move on, he said, and I suggest you do the same. You are a beautiful young woman. Men would line up behind you. It's probably been like this all along. Let's just move on and live our own lives before any more damage is done. Please, baby, don't say that. I don't want to threaten you, but if you don't fucking leave me alone, I'll have to come after you and destroy you. I really don't want to do this, so please, from now on, any communication between us will be carried out only through the mediation of lawyers. Don't contact me, not even by email or text message. This is the last time you'll hear from me. Goodbye, Molly. With that, he ended the conversation. Molly was still holding the phone to her ear, even though the conversation was over. She was very confused. In her short life, there weren't many situations she couldn't handle, or people she couldn't manipulate. Of course he's in pain, but he wouldn't do anything to hurt me, would he? Ignoring his clear instructions and threats, she immediately called him back. She received no reply. She tried again but found that he had blocked her number. She reluctantly decided to give him a day or two to cool off. He would come to his senses eventually, she told herself. He must. Leo parked his car in a designated parking lot under an apartment building. He came out and was immediately amazed at how clean and well-groomed everything looked. There was greenery everywhere, and he noticed several young joggers in a nearby park. It was a much nicer neighborhood than the one he had lived in before. He was smiling as he climbed the stairs to the second floor. The sight of the old man who greeted him at the entrance surprised him. He looked old on the phone, but Leo hadn't expected to see a man in his 80s. The old man introduced himself as John. Leo found him to be a stern and businesslike man, a man who had seen and experienced enough in his life not to waste time on nonsense anymore, and whom no one should mess with. While giving Leo a tour, he explained that the previous tenants, a young couple, had to leave urgently because of some family problems in their hometown. The condo was in excellent condition, fully furnished and equipped with all the latest electronics. The couple even left behind kitchen utensils. So, what do you say, young man? Are you interested? Yes, Leo said dryly, trying not to sound too enthusiastic. How old are you? 27. Are you divorced? John asked when his attentive eyes noticed the unburned spot left by the ring on Leo's finger. In the process. Do you want to talk about it? She cheated on me, Leo replied bitterly. John thought for a moment, then said, I grew up here. I spent my entire childhood in this area, until I got married and built my own house. My parents continued to live here until they passed away, and they bequeathed it to me. We both know that I can demand a lot more for this place, but it's important to me that whoever gets it not only keeps it, but also earns the right to live in it. Leo nodded understandingly. What are your plans? Get married again and start a family. Career? Second priority? What is your biggest dream? Leo was silent for a few seconds, seriously considering the question. He wasn't surprised by his response, but he was surprised by how emotional he suddenly became. To be the best father a man can be, he said with tears in his eyes. The father I never had. The old man studied Leo's face for a while, then took a folded piece of paper from his shirt pocket, spread it out on the kitchen table, put a pen on it, and said, Fill in all the blanks and sign. I'll come by tomorrow night to pick up the deposit check and 6 checks in a row for the whole year. I'm not forcing anyone to live here, he said, putting a pair of keys on the table. If for some reason you don't want to live here, just let me know. A lot of people would love to jump at this deal. Yes, sir. Thank you, Leo managed to say, stunned, before the strange old man walked out the door and left. Leo stood staring blankly at the door, trying to process what had just happened. It must be karma working overtime to fix Molly's act, he decided. However, he didn't have much time to think about it. He had to pick up his things from the motel and check out. On the way back from the motel, he stopped to buy bed linen, blankets, towels, and groceries. He also signed up for a nearby gym. It took him about 4 hours to get comfortable in his new place, After a quick snack, he went to the park for a run. Before he met Molly, he ran at least 4 times a week and went to the gym at least 3 times. Since he got married, Molly has taken up all his free time. He decided to return to as many good habits as possible. He was dizzy from the number of hollows he saw on the treadmill. Almost every girl who passed by sent him an inviting smile, and he rewarded them with a comprehensive scan of every protruding part of their toned bodies. 2 days before that, he had avoided prolonged eye contact with the fairer sex. He knew how women looked at him, and he wasn't going to risk his marriage for the sake of bland pleasures. His loyalty was absolute, but now that he was free from the shackles of love and marriage, a new ocean of possibilities opened up in front of him, and he intended to make the most of it. Who says there's no cure for a broken heart? Molly was just about to leave her office on Wednesday afternoon when a woman in a baseball cap handed her a brown envelope. She almost fainted on the spot. She didn't even know how she managed to get home without hitting all the cars parked on her street sideways, as she could barely see through her tears. Once at home, she tried to contact Leo, but she was still blocked on all possible platforms, including social media. Bob refused to talk to her, and Leo's sister burst into a series of expletives that would have embarrassed a sailor. Little by little, her pain turned into disappointment, which later turned into rage and disgust. There was only one means of communication left at her disposal, and she intended to make full use of it. For a long hour, she formulated, polished, and honed the message that would change her life. In the end, she sent it with great satisfaction. Satisfaction that soon turned to panic. Leo had just returned home from the gym when his smartphone rang. He was already used to ignoring text and voice messages from unknown numbers, but this time it was different. The phone showed 4 new emails and kept beeping every time a new email arrived. First, he had to block Molly's email address to stop the flow. Then he looked through her recent emails. They were all short apologies, begging him not to pay attention to the first message, as she was angry, upset, and unbalanced after being served earlier in the day. She insisted that she didn't really mean anything by what she wrote. Leo's curiosity got the better of him, and he opened this first message. "Listen, you weakling. I received your divorce papers today. You're a coward, hiding behind a lawyer, running away like a child instead of having the courage to face me like a man and tell me you're going to leave me. Since you're not brave enough to hear the truth in person, I had to send this message to the hole where you're hiding. You're just a kid, a weak and unhappy child, and I'm tired of being a surrogate mother for you. If you were a real man, I wouldn't have to look for someone who would satisfy my needs. Yes, I cheated on you because you're a boring, sticky, predictable loser. I never wanted to make love to you. I wanted to be used to make me feel alive, to feel that every part of my body and soul has been touched and ignited. And when I say every place, I mean every place, including the ones you refuse to touch because you're too clean and sensitive. You created a perfect image of me and treated me like a fragile princess, so I had to run away from you at least once a week so that I could feel like myself again, and not a fragile lollipop. It's a miracle that I didn't get diabetes during the years that I lived with you. I'm glad you ran away. You're not worthy of me. It saved me from spending the rest of my life with an effeminate weakling. Yes, I lied to you repeatedly, because in the real world, people lie to each other. It's a matter of survival. People step on each other on their way to self-realization. This is a world of predators where naive and weak people like you have the right to exist only as spectators. I have already signed your divorce papers, and tomorrow I will dance all the way to your lawyer's office to file them. You're so miserable that I wouldn't be surprised if in a few weeks you come crawling to me and begging for forgiveness. And maybe I'll forgive you, because the only reason I married you is because of your good genes, and certainly not your pathetic personality. Maybe I'll even agree to have a child with you, provided he's raised by a real man. Now I am finally free to find a real lover who can satisfy my material and mental needs. Goodbye, loser. You'll never hear from me again." Leo gritted his teeth and clenched his fists as he finished reading the message. He thought that nothing about her could surprise him anymore, and he was wrong. Even if she typed it in a state of stress and pain, most of the things she wrote seemed honest and deliberate. A new and unfamiliar sensation crept from the depths of his soul into his mind, dark and dangerous. Some of his personality traits that had been buried deep in the basements of his subconscious now required recognition. Leo already knew what he was going to do tomorrow, and God help whoever got in his way. "No, you fool," he whispered, heading for the shower. "It's not a matter of survival. There are a lot of good people in this world. The only problem is that there are also a lot of people like you in it. Molly was sitting on the couch in her living room in utter despair. She rocked back and forth in an almost catatonic rhythm, trying to accept what she had just done. If there was any chance of reconciliation in the future, she had just missed it. Because she couldn't stand the pain and loneliness, she called the only person who could help her, the only person who would listen to her. She called Ben, her boss. As soon as he heard her voice, he realized that something was terribly wrong. He promised to be there within half an hour. Half an hour later, as he parked his luxury off-road BMW at the curb next to a dilapidated apartment building, he asked himself if it was wise to leave his car unattended in such an area. The feeling of disgust increased as he climbed the damp stairs to the second floor. As soon as he entered her apartment, she fell into his arms, sobbing. It took him almost 20 minutes to calm her down, and another 10 minutes to take off her clothes. When he was about to leave, he was determined to help her move to a better place. No decent person should live in such a hellish neighborhood, he told himself. Molly felt much better after he left. I have to somehow weaken his complete control over me, she thought, starting tomorrow. On Thursday afternoon, Ann Robinson, the head of human resources, was waiting for a special guest at the entrance to the office. She usually didn't receive guests so quickly, but her assistant assured her that this one was special. She realized what was going on as soon as she saw the husband of one of her promising young employees walk in. All the employees literally stopped working. He was definitely attracting attention, but Ann was curious as to why he had come. She didn't know Mrs. Bloom very well, but she had known her boss for almost 40 years. They were neighbors and met for the first time in kindergarten. Leo sat in the waiting room, sullen, rather rudely ignoring the worker bees buzzing around him. He knew some of them superficially from his work at the company, but this time he did not show his sociable and pleasant nature. Anne adjusted her clothes and hairstyle one last time, then went out and invited Leo into her office. Once behind the closed door, she asked him to sit down and said, "Well, Mr. Bloom, what can I do for you?" "Miss Robinson, is there any recommendation in the company's articles of association regarding intimate relationships between employees?" Anne guessed why he was here, but she was still surprised by how quickly he put his cards on the table. He's serious, she thought. In general, we do not encourage fraternization between employees, especially when it comes to direct relations between the manager and subordinates, but there are no clear instructions when it comes to non-working hours. What if it happens during business hours? Then this is an abusive office and a serious crime. Actually, it's stealing. Employees who engage in private activities while working steal their wages from their employer. In that case, I would like to report a couple of thieves who work here. My wife, Mrs. Bloom, and her boss, Mr. White. Anne squinted at him, then asked, "Do you have any evidence?" "Yes, actually, they're both at his house right now, and since it's only 3 p.m., I assume they should be at work." Anne looked shocked. She couldn't believe that her colleagues could be so stupid and reckless. "I'm sure there must be a good explanation for this. To be honest, I doubt it. They've been doing this weekly for the last 6 months. It all started on Monday, and then they added Thursdays. If you try to call any of their numbers, you will be redirected to their voice messages." Anne was getting nervous. She had a good relationship with her longtime neighbor, Betty White, and she knew that Betty took her daughter to the tennis club on Mondays and Thursdays. This made those days in particular a convenient time for Mr. White to do something he didn't want his wife to know about. "Maybe it's just a one-time, why are you protecting your friend?" Leo attacked her. "A friend? I know that you have been neighbors and friends for many years. It's amazing how much information you can get these days through the internet and social media." Anne thought for a moment and then said, "Well, yes, he has been my colleague and acquaintance for many years, but I will not defend him if what you say is true." Then she picked up the office phone and dialed a number somewhere. Leo could only hear part of her conversation, but he assumed she was talking to Mr. White's secretary. "Hey, Ruth, is Ben here? When did he leave? Did he leave alone? Did he say when they would be back? They're not coming back? Is this the first time they both leave in the middle of the day? Don't lie to me. Ruth, this is a very serious matter. Don't risk your job for it." "I understand. Okay, don't tell anyone about this conversation, especially Ben. Am I making myself clear? Okay, bye." Anne got up from the table, grabbed her purse, and headed for the exit. "Come with me, please. We need to catch a couple of lovebirds." Anne and Leo were sitting in her company car on Eccles Street, facing the White family home. A green Mini Cooper and a large BMW were parked side by side in front of them. "So how are you going to deal with them?" Leo asked, turning to look at the handsome, middle-aged executive sitting in the driver's seat next to him. At 45, Anne was no longer the bombshell she was 20 years or two pregnant. Nevertheless, she was still a woman's treasure for connoisseurs. Leo has always had a weakness for mature women, but he has never dared to act according to his desires. Maybe it's time for a change, he thought, looking at her full and delicate features again. He noticed that she didn't have a wedding ring. "I'm not going to knock on the door if that's what you're thinking. They still have the right to privacy. We just have to wait for them to come out. Betty and Liz are due to arrive soon, so it won't take long." Leo opened the window slightly, hearing the sounds of a piano coming from a large house. It was not a cheerful variation of 30, but a very sad prelude in B-flat minor from the first book. He couldn't help but feel a little sad for her. After all, they had so many good memories of listening to music together. Anne stared at the profile of the young Adonis sitting next to her, trying to figure out what could have made Molly cheat on him. She noticed how his face contorted with sadness and pain as he listened to the melancholic melody coming from the house. "This is her game, isn't it?" Leo nodded silently, looking out the window. "Don't torture yourself over this. It's not your fault. At least you don't have kids. My Elaine was 15 and my Davy was only 9 when their father ran away with his personal assistant." Leo turned his head in surprise. "Welcome to the club." She smiled bitterly. "Over time, the pain will subside, but the scars will remain." They both sat in silence for a while. Then Anne asked, "So how long have you been suspecting?" "From day one, I guess," Leo replied. She had dark marks on her waist and shoulders marks left by a rough and prolonged grip. I was afraid to ask, knowing that if she had lied, I would have found out right away. So I preferred not to know. I convinced myself that if I hadn't known, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. "Don't worry, Leo. I can promise that you won't be alone for long." She's only 22, and he would fit my Elaine like a glove, she suddenly thought. Anne and Leo soon fell into a friendly conversation, forgetting about the circumstances that brought them together. Leo found out that her eldest daughter, Elaine, was going to get a master's degree in marine biology at a local community college, while her 16-year-old son Davy was in his second year of high school. Anne and Davy lived separately, but Elaine came home every weekend. Leo briefly told her about everything that had happened since his friend Bob called him, right up to the strange meeting he had with his current landlord. "So what about you, Anne?" he asked playfully. "Has there ever been a Romeo in your life?" She was about to answer when the front door of the house opened and Molly came out. Anne jumped out of the car and headed straight for the unsuspecting Molly. "Mrs. Bloom," she called out just as Molly was about to get into her car. Molly's eyes widened in surprise when she recognized the HR manager. "Yes, Miss Robinson? May I ask what you are doing at your manager's house during business hours?" Molly's heart began to pound wildly as she realized that she might be in serious trouble. "Oh, he asked me to help with the babysitter," Molly tried. "His car is here." "Oh yes, he just came to replace me." "So if I ring the bell, sweet Liz and her father will meet me?" No, Mrs. White just came and took her to the tennis club. I've been sitting here for almost an hour. No one came in or out of the house." I "Come to my office first thing in the morning," Anne said coldly. "It doesn't look good for you, young lady." She left the stunned Molly behind and returned to her car. Molly stood there stunned, but eventually got into her car and drove away. As she passed Anne's car, she looked back and caught the piercing gaze of her future ex-husband. "What about her boss?" Leo hissed through his teeth in suppressed rage, not even looking at Anne. "I will have to notify my superiors. After all, he is a high-ranking executive, but under no circumstances can I imagine him retaining his position. This was not a one-time mistake, but don't feel too sorry for him. He was born with money. He will survive." They were both silent for a moment until Anne said with a devilish grin, "You should have seen her face when I approached her. It was priceless." "I did," Leo said, and they both burst out laughing. After their laughter subsided, their eyes met and there was a moment of intense tension between them. If someone had accidentally walked between them, they would probably have been electrocuted. In the end, Leo broke the silence. "I'm sorry for being blunt, but I find you very attractive, and I really need a distraction right now. Would you like to make love?" Anne was completely shocked by his arrogance and vulgar expressions. She was about to slap him when she heard her own voice whisper, Yes, definitely yes. When? What is it? He asked enthusiastically. Anne blinked at him dazedly until she finally came to her senses and shook her head. Not now. Let me just go home and make sure Davy isn't there, and I'll call you. After exchanging numbers, Leo got out, watched her drive away, and was about to get into his car when a luxury SUV pulled into White's driveway and parked next to the BMW. Mrs. White was about to enter her house with her daughter when a sudden voice from behind startled her. "Mrs. White, can I have a word with you?" Betty instinctively turned around and spread her arms, protecting her daughter. Her anxiety lessened as soon as she saw the man's face. She recognized him. "What do you want?" "My name is Leo. Your husband and my wife." He paused, looking warily at 11-year-old Liz. "Honey, why don't you go inside and change your clothes?" Mrs. White said to the young girl. "I'll be there in a minute." As soon as Liz entered the house, Leo continued. "As I said before, your husband and my wife—" "Molly Bloom, right?" She interrupted him. "Yeah. Do you know about them?" "I had reason to suspect. I even caught them once, but that was only after the act. She was playing the piano when I entered the house. Ben said he invited her because she really missed the game. When I asked him why the bed was rumpled, he said that her playing made him sleepy, and he decided to take a nap." "And you didn't do anything about it?" "Life is difficult for some of us, Mr. Bloom. I can't just think about myself." Seeing the disappointment on Leo's face, she added, "Everything is different when you have a child. I have to take care of her welfare first. There are other considerations that I would prefer not to talk about right now. This is neither the time nor the place. Listen, I need to get inside. Why don't we have lunch this weekend? We have a lot to talk about. Here's my business card. Feel free to call me anytime." Leo took the card and watched as Betty entered the house and closed the door behind her. "What a lovely lady," he thought to himself as he answered the phone. It was Anne telling him that the way was clear and that she was waiting for him. Leo was excited as he walked down the street to Anne's house. It would be the first time in more than 4 years that he would be with someone other than Molly. He had some concerns about performance. He was always gentle and attentive with Molly, although in his opinion he was too energetic. His love for her served as handcuffs. He couldn't be rude to her even if he wanted to. Slapping her ass seemed sacrilegious, but now he was finally free to experiment with new ideas and show other aspects of his personality. When he got home, the front door mysteriously opened. He couldn't see Anne, who was hiding behind him, avoiding the curious stares of random neighbors. When he was inside, Anne led him into the kitchen and offered him a glass of wine. He noticed that the bottle was half empty, and Anne's glass had already been used. He wondered how much she had drunk before he came. "I'm not the only one who's nervous." She refilled her glass and they drank, then exchanged smiles and nervous glances. Suddenly Leo put down his glass, closed the distance between them, put his right hand on her waist and his left hand behind her head, and pulled her to him in a wet and passionate kiss. Anne dissolved into the young man's body, allowing him to taste her and almost swallow her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been so aroused or full of lust. After her husband left her, she tried dating, although all the men she found were either gold diggers, rich snobs, or exhausted and desperate old men. At some point, she simply resigned herself to her fate and stopped looking. In her wildest dreams, she couldn't believe that she would end up with someone like Leo, even if only for one day. All her pent-up desires and needs were ready to explode. When Leo's hands began to wander under her robe, she had to use all her willpower to break their kiss. She knew Davy could come home at any minute, and the last thing she wanted was to risk this rare opportunity by traumatizing a teenager with Oedipus syndrome. She grabbed Leo's arm and pulled him along with her as she climbed the stairs to her bedroom. Once inside, she went straight to the bed. She was about to climb on top of him when Leo grabbed her arm, pulled her back to his body, and then pinned her against the wall. She was a little worried when her back hit the wall, but when she saw Leo's lustful eyes narrow and focus on her, all her fears disappeared. He opened her robe and spread it apart, enjoying what he saw. He caressed her body from her hips to her armpits, cupped her breasts. Breathing heavily, Anne desperately tried to unbutton his trousers and breathed a sigh of relief when she finally succeeded. She also found out that he was going to become a commando. Leo lifted her left hip to his waist and tried to enter her, but the height difference prevented easy access, so he lifted her other hip, cupped her buttocks, and lifted her high into the air. Clinging to her, he began to slowly lower her onto his throbbing shaft, piercing her. They both took a deep breath and threw their heads back as she sank to the hilt. They've just started to get into a rhythm. Leo admired her surprised and exhausted face, enjoying the result of his efforts. They pushed and clawed, their sighs getting louder and soon turned into moans and groans. Their sweaty bodies were approaching the long-awaited climax. Leo's first, Anne's second. A few more jolts and they'll get there. Anne dug her nails deep into Leo's shoulders, feeling like she was about to explode. "Mom?" a young female voice called from below. Stunned, Anne lowered her head and bit Leo's shoulder in a desperate attempt to stifle a scream as an indescribable supernova pierced her body. "Mom? Are you okay?" Elaine's excited voice rang out. Terrified, Leo was forced to carefully lower Anne and begin to dress feverishly. "Yes, dear," she replied in a breathless voice. "I'm just practicing. I'll be down in a minute." Anne straightened her robe, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and went downstairs while Leo tucked his shirt into his trousers. "Afternoon exercise?" Elaine asked mischievously, picking up one of the used wine glasses. "I think you've been practicing naked if you're wearing a bathrobe." "Well, you know," said the blushing mother, "I had to do something about that belly fat." "So did you come home early from work and immediately start exercising?" Elaine, amused, continued to tease her mother. "Wait, what are you doing here?" "Jill is getting married today. I told you about it the last time we talked, so I decided to come home a day earlier. Julie will pick me up and bring me back. She never drinks anyway." "Oh, you must be starving, honey. Come on, you should try the mushroom pie I baked yesterday. It turned out to be amazing. I hope Davy left some for us." She put her hand on her daughter's waist and gently led her into the kitchen. Leo took the hint and started sneaking down the stairs. He was almost touching the door handle when he heard, "Mom, who is this guy?" "Who's who?" Anne asked, turning around. "Oh, this is a friend. Yes, a friend from work. We work together. And we train together. Oh, let me introduce Mr. Bloom." Leo froze for a moment with his hand outstretched to the door handle when he realized he had to turn around and introduce himself. He hobbled into the kitchen with his shirt half out of his pants, unable to look up in embarrassment. Finally, he reached the mother and daughter, raised his hand to shake the hand that was already extended to him when his heart stopped beating. Time and space ceased to exist as Leo stared at the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. A warm cosmic breeze filled his soul as all the pieces of his broken heart were reunited. He and Elaine froze, staring at each other for what seemed like an eternity, until Anne made a few throat-clearing noises that brought them back to earth. "Nice to meet you, Miss Robinson," Leo said when he was finally able to speak. "I'm glad to meet you too, Mr. Bloom." "Just Leo, please. Elaine." After a few more minutes of silence, Anne had to clear her throat again, as they held their hands together without trembling. They awkwardly pulled their hands free, and Leo, not knowing what else to say, muttered, "It's probably time for me to leave. I hope to see you again someday, Elaine." "Yes, Leo, it was nice to meet you. We would love to see you again." Leo headed for the door, awkwardly turning his head back, unable to take his eyes off Elaine's angelic face. Once outside, he stood motionless for a long time, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Is she real? Am I dreaming? Will I see her again? Has Anne gone crazy? Eventually, he started walking up the road to his car, almost bouncing like a child. He didn't notice, but he was humming the 30th variation. On Friday afternoon, Leo sat in an Italian restaurant and waited for her to show up. The waiter had just put a bottle of wine on the table when Leo saw her coming from a distance. Her bright sundress shone from the sunlight coming from behind her. When she came in, Leo got up and put a chair for her. "Hi, Betty." "Hello, Leo. I'm glad you called. I've been looking forward to seeing you again." After exchanging polite words and getting to know each other a little, they finally got to the point. "You probably want to know why I'm not throwing his treacherous ass to the curb," Betty said, clearly trying to convince herself of the same thing as Leo. "There are several reasons. First of all, he's a good father, and I don't want to deprive Liz of her father's love at this stage of her life. Secondly, I signed a prenuptial agreement that wouldn't leave me much in the event of a divorce. I would probably have received generous alimony and child support for several years, but it would all end when Liz became an adult. Thirdly, Ben has, how should I put it, special desires. I'm not thrilled that he's indulging them with someone else, but I'm thrilled that I don't have to be that person." Leo nodded understandingly, although he did not agree. "So you're just going to do nothing?" "No. I have my own business, which Ben helped me create. and it is developing beautifully. I believe that in 2 or 3 years I will achieve financial independence. By then, Liz will be old enough to get through the divorce. So, at the same time, you sacrifice your happiness. Oh no. I have every intention of enjoying life as much as possible. Leo tilted his head in confusion. Didn't you say that your apartment is within walking distance? Betty asked with a lascivious smile. Leo smiled back and motioned for the waiter to bring the bill. Later that evening, Leo sat on his balcony enjoying a cold beer, letting the pleasant summer breeze dry his sweaty, bitten, scratched body. Betty had just left him devastated, and he couldn't help but think that this Ben must be a really evil bastard if this banshee thought he was too cool for her. I probably won't be able to lie on my back for a week. Suddenly, a beautiful image flashed before his eyes. Elaine. Wouldn't it be too awkward if I asked Anne for her phone number? While he was hesitating, the goddess of fortune intervened and his phone rang. It was Anne. Hello? He said anxiously. Hi, Leo. This is Anne. I hope I'm not interrupting you. No, not at all. I was just about to call you myself. Look, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Elaine hasn't stopped talking about you since you left, and I believe it's mutual. She's too shy to call you herself, so I'm sending you her number. Please call her. She's waiting for your call. Thank you, Anne. I'll call you, but I have to admit I have some doubts. She is still young and probably not ready to start a family, and I also assume that as a marine biologist, she would probably go on long research trips. Oh, stop talking anymore. Just invite her to dinner and discuss everything. Okay, I'll call her tomorrow. Listen, about yesterday, I want to apologize. Don't you dare apologize. I had an unforgettable experience that I will cherish until the day I die. I'm almost old enough to be your mother. I never expected anything beyond what we had, but I really expect this to stay between us. Am I making myself clear? Yeah, absolutely, Miss Robinson. I will treasure it too. Good. Now enjoy the rest of the evening, and I'll see you soon. That night, Leo slept like the dead, on his stomach. Elaine chose a quiet and romantic restaurant for her first date with Leo, and everything went smoothly. They got along from the first moment and talked for hours about everything in the world. When they had nothing to talk about, they just looked at each other, holding hands. They lost their sense of time, and when it was closing time, the restaurant staff just put the bill on their table. Elaine insisted on paying half. Leo received a chaste kiss on her doorstep and flew to the moon. When he returned home, he knew with absolute certainty that no matter what difficulties they faced in the future, they would overcome them. He couldn't help but think that everything that happened was ultimately for the best. If Molly had remained faithful to him, he would not have met Elaine. Tuesday was a busy day for Molly. Not only was it her first day at her new job, but she also needed to find time to buy a new dress for her special date that night and dress up. She had no problems finding a new job. In an interview, when asked why she was leaving her previous job, she replied without batting an eye that she felt devastated and was looking for a new challenge. She gave Ben's phone number as a reference. Her attractive appearance, of course, helped too. After the kind soul took care to inform her that Leo was spotted in the company of another worldly beauty in a romantic restaurant, she wasted no time signing up for a paid dating site for academics. She was quite amazed at the number of responses she received in just one day. As a result of the short selection process, there were 2 promising candidates who not only seemed smart, but also looked great and were the right age. She was going to meet one guy tonight, and the other was reserved for tomorrow, just in case. The date exceeded all her expectations. He was smart, funny, attentive, had a promising career, and was very handsome. He also seemed to be fascinated by the charming beauty sitting in front of him. Their conversation went smoothly and touched on many interesting topics. When they started discussing their hobbies, she asked him what kind of music he liked. He wisely replied that he had no particular style preferences. He said that he loved everything good and beautiful, including classical music. Molly raised an eyebrow and immediately rushed to break through. For example, which one? You know, as usual, Beethoven, Mozart, Bach. The poor guy didn't understand what he was getting into.